Sometimes you put out on the internet that you're going to go live at 2 p.m. Central, and then you realize you have to go live at 1 p.m. Central or you're going to miss a very important appointment. And I probably could have realized that yesterday, but I didn't really know. So anyway, we're going to go live an hour early. I did put it out on our social networks, and I am starting the stream over on Noster so we can get that done. Okay, guys, we're gonna do the show today. I'm gonna give it a quick break for easy editing, and then we're gonna let her rip all about coffee and spending money on Starbucks coffee or expensive coffees at your coffee shop and how that relates to your life and homesteading. Anyway, let's give it 5. Welcome to Living Free in Tennessee, where we talk about building the life you choose on your terms. Today is Monday, September 23rd, 2024, and this is episode 954 of Living Free in Tennessee, and it's a Monday show. So we're going to have our usual Monday segments, which are Tales from the Prepper Pantry, the live stream schedule, the weekly shopping report, Operation Independence. We don't have a frugality tip this week, so if you've got one, email it to Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com. But the main topic of today's show is about the $7 coffee. You know, that beautiful $7 coffee that comes in your cup. And when you read all of those articles about how to get ahead financially, they tell you to stop buying Starbucks. Yeah. And that pisses people off. Well, I'm going to talk about why it really does matter. Maybe it's not quite that simple, but it really does matter. I'm also going to do all of the things we usually do. Before I do that, though, I want to talk about our featured event of today's show. And that is, there's a pre-event workshop series at the Self-Reliance Festival. And I wasn't sure if everybody was aware of them, but it's actually kind of cool. So Self-Reliance Festival is October 5th and 6th. That's a Saturday, Sunday. Thursday and Friday, there are pre-classes where you can get more in-depth learning on a couple of topics. And the cool thing is you get to hang out with the people who are going to be at the event that you want to go to the event to see. Not all of them, but some of them. And that gives you a little bit more chance at some one-on-one with them. Now, our instructors for the workshop are Sonny Puzikas, who is the man to learn self-defense from. Homestead Medical, who is the man to learn emergency medical interventions and what happens long-term if you need to take care of somebody. And then the third set of instructors, there are 7 of us doing a boot camp, including Sonny and Chuck Peoples from Homestead Medical. Sonny Puzikas is one of the reasons he is one of my go-to people who I want to learn about self-defense from. And self-defense is like, I hate it when I describe it that way, but it's the only way I know how to describe it. It's because he comes from it, not just from a physicality standpoint, not from a pew-pew standpoint, from a mindset standpoint, right? So he's looking at the whole picture, and that's pretty cool. Now, he has 2 classes. On Wednesday, October 3rd, we have Fight Hacker, Escapology. This is going to be adapted to your level of fitness. It is going to get physical, but the reason it's called Fight Hacker is I believe he's teaching you how to turn the tables or change the narrative, even if it gets physical. That's one. And we did Fight Like a Girl last Self-Reliance Festival. And once people went through that class, they're like, oh, I see now. That's the kind of instructor you want. That's over at selfreliancefestival.com. On Friday, he's doing a class called The Science and Art of De-Escalation. And this is why. You win a fight 100% of the time if there's no fight. That's a win. There's no risk of loss if there's no fight. And so he's going to talk about not just how to be artful about it, but the science behind getting things to like simmer down a little bit. So that's over at selfreliancefestival.com as well. Then Chuck Peoples from Homestead Medical on Wednesday, October 3rd, is doing advanced wound closure. So it's not just stitching, it's stapling. It's different ways to get things that are open to not be opened anymore. And it will involve wound care because sometimes you can't close a wound. So that is a 7 or 8 hour class, hands-on, intensive, and you go home with your own practice kit for closures. That's also at selfreliancefestival.com. The other class on Friday, October 4th, is Self-Reliance Boot Camp. And that's going to start with learning how to process a rabbit. We're going to then prepare them for lunch and cook them off grid. And then there's going to be a caring and raising for rabbit sessions. There's salve making. There's how to raise food. There's all sorts of different, the off-grid water, all sorts of things that we will just cover from a variety of awesome instructors. And we're going to end the day with a roundtable discussion of some pretty badass people who are coming to SRF, including I asked Jack Spirko to just like, can you get there Friday a little early and sit on this for a Q&A session? And he's promised to. So as long as Waze continues to work and he doesn't get pulled over on the way there, he'll be on that roundtable. But if not, we've got John Willis, we've got Amanda Willis, we've got me, we've got Sean Mills, we've got Tim Riley, who, if you haven't checked out how that dude, he's pretty with it. It's just a whole bunch of really cool instructors. Okay. Now we're going to thank two sponsors, and then we're going to dive into our first segment. InvestibleWealth.com, and John Pugliano is our first sponsor. He's been supportive of the show since the day we met, and he has been sponsoring us since he heard about sponsorship. And he has a really cool podcast called the Wealth Steading Podcast, where you can increase your financial literacy. Now, I chose John as the sponsor of today's show because we're talking about $7 coffee. And one of my first interactions with John after I met him in person was less about investing and more about how do I make sure I have money to invest. And he gave me some time and talked me through some things which have started to pay off. So just saying. Anyway, check out his podcast at investablewealth.com. Our second sponsor of today's show is all about freedom. And that's our friends over at Above Phone. That's abovephone.com. Above Phone is a way that you can take ownership of your digital signature, your digital privacy, by choosing what information about you gets out over your cell phone, because the de-Googleification of your life is not necessarily an easy thing if you've gone all in on that, but it's not impossible. Check out more at abovephone.com. And if you use the coupon code LivingFreeTN, that will get you $50 off anything at their store. And if you use the link that I have in the show notes, they'll know that I sent you, but that's not the end of the world. Like, just go check them out. If you come to Self-Reliance Festival, they have a booth there. So you can like sit down with Hakeem and he can walk you through all that stuff. Plus, if you listened to the live stream I did with him, you know all about that. And this is my time to shout out to Noster over on the other screen. I haven't figured out how to get my Noster comments in on this dashboard. So I have two dashboards now. Thanks for watching, guys. I have committed to making my tech something that is decentralized, because I think having decentralized tech is very important, as well as decentralizing everything else in your life that you can. But that doesn't mean I won't take advantage of being on YouTube and other platforms while they let me stay. So welcome to the show, Noster. If you guys want to get questions in, you can put it in the stream. I'll see your comments. If you put the first word in all caps, I'll know that's you. Same for y'all on the YouTube live and Facebook live streams. You can just put it in all caps, and then I'll know you want your question in. This week we are going live 3 more times. Tomorrow at 9:30, I'm on with Angry Prepper out of New York. Woo, 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 and Sean Mills. And then Thursday, I'm on at 6 p.m. with the Great American Preparedness Tour live stream. We do one a month around the time of our festivals. And then finally, of course, Friday, we'll be doing the Homestead Happenings update at 9:30 Central with Tactical Redneck. It's now time for our first segment, which is Tales from the Prepper Pantry, where we talk about storing what you use and using what you store. Y'all, Self-Reliance Festival's in like 10 days. It's in like 10 days. Now, before Self-Reliance Festival comes, I just leave and go there, and we set up and get ready for everybody, because we're turning an outdoor space into a festival with very little infrastructure. Like, we have more infrastructure there than we did that first time, but we try to do the best we can to minimize the impact on John Willis's factory, which means we put up tents. There's, showers to get up and running. There's all sorts of stuff outside that needs to be done. Now, you do get to go in the factory if you come to the festival, and you don't want to miss that because there's great vendors in there. But I won't be around. And what that means for the pantry is 0% of my brain power is interested in worrying about what's in my pantry or what needs to be back in my pantry. And this is when my power pantry method is super helpful to me, because right now, the reorder thing that needs to happen just happens on autopilot. And that's because I've set it up with the power pantry method. So that's pretty cool. I've also noticed that meat flies out of my freezers when I'm doing carnivore. But then I went back and I figured out, because a lot of people say, I can't do carnivore, I can't do ketovore or ketogenic or try any of these things because it's just too expensive. Like, groceries have gone way up. It's a problem, right? Okay. Well, so I actually bought some meat at the store last week, and I will buy meat for the next 3 weeks because the kinds of meats I want for convenience revolve a lot around bacon and breakfast sausage and cold cuts because they're easy, they're grab and go, and I don't have to cook anything, right? Well, I mean, what I do is I just cook a big pile of breakfast meats and throw it in my fridge, and then I just eat that. Well, that meant I needed to buy some of that stuff because we are officially out of home cured meats at this point until we get another animal in. So I spent money at the grocery store to feed 2 people. And I was like, well, this would be interesting to just calculate how much our whole grocery budget was for the week. So I added that. And then I knew how many pounds of meat came out of the freezer approximately. Like I actually rounded up just in case I was guessing low because I think my packages of ground meat are 5 pounds, but they might be 4. Like you just put it in the bag till the bag's. I don't actually weigh that carefully for the stuff we're using here. And yes, we do process animals and grind our own meat. And yes, I did use some of that last year. I also used some meat that was from the cow we buy every year. And that's 350 a pound average for steaks, or I just do 350 a pound for everything because that's what we spent on it. So our actual cost per person for 1 week on carnivore, that's like eating only meat. So that's meat, that's eggs. I do allow some cheese, and I did have cheese last week, and it was $52 a person. And that's not even trying to like push down on cost at all. That was 52. And the way I did that was fair market price for the meats we produced here. So like the lamb is 11.99 a pound that we ate. And then actual price if we spent money, which is the beef at 350. So I mean, it's not the cheapest you could eat, but that's not a terrible grocery price. And what's not costing money in there is anything processed. I'm also not drinking any alcohol or any other beverages of that nature, but it's a definitely a very livable budget and for food, and I wasn't hungry at all. Okay, I also planted a bunch of Swiss chard in the raised bed, which I'm watering several times a day until I make an automated waterer for it because it was a little hydrophobic, just because we're getting this bed started for the first time, right? Like, so it got really dry because Tactical's been kind of managing stuff by himself. And then I watered it and I put my hand in. I'm like, it's still dry. So I've been out there like 3 times a day watering it, and it's finally starting to do what it needs to do. We do have wood in the bottom that needs to be fully soaked, and we have not had a lot of that like Tennessee rain for that. So I spent $30 on buying actual seedlings from the store. I did not start my seedlings for the chard. And I put a lot of those in the raised bed, and then the rest are going off around the property. So even though I'm eating carnivore right now, I intend to go off of that at the end of October and then go back to sort of a meat and vegetables diet. And then I want to be able to be getting fresh vegetables off my homestead. So, and Swiss chard is something that like goes through the winter here pretty well, unless we have something crazy happen with just a little bit of row cover. And row covering a raised bed ain't hard. So I may end up transplanting some of those into my aquaponics system when the marigolds get beat back. But right now, my aquaponics system is all about flowers and peppers and sage plants. So that's where we're at with that. Next segment is the weekly shopping report from Joe. This is just something that started in 2021 when we were having all sorts of weird rolling supply chain issues. He started tracking like where does it look bare at the store and where does it look overly full? What are the prices doing? And so it's kind of morphed into a bit of a report about how the stores are, and then he prices out some standard items every week, and you can look over the last several years at how like we'll see the prices spike and then go down and then like eke up. So you can see that. What's interesting is this week, a gallon of untainted regular that's ethanol free for our new friends watching, $3.59.9, which is where it's been like solidly for months. And I don't anticipate that going up before the election. In fact, I noticed that they passed an emergency spending bill to, put us even more in debt, probably because the Republicans decided right now wasn't a good time for a standoff because they gotta get elected. So, I'm sure that didn't play into that decision at all. So you can totally expect another showdown in December. I'm pretty sure no matter who wins the election. That seems to be what we do every Christmas is run around talking about government shutdowns, something that I kind of welcome when it happens, but I'm in the minority on that one, aren't I? Okay, Dollar Tree stock levels were good, and so stock levels were good at Dollar Tree. Hobby Lobby, on the other hand, is not doing so great, so they have holes on their shelves. Home Depot 2x4x8 was $3.85, which is up a little bit from where it was earlier this year at 325. Aldi, they have Cornish cross. They have Cornish game hens. Sorry, not Cornish cross. I was like thinking about processing different birds. They have Cornish game hens, which Joe really likes. So that's kind of cool. I'm actually probably stopping in Aldi today just to see what's there and to see if I want any like cured meats for on the road. Um, we found everything we wanted except for Nutella. Includes a new variety of wet cat food. Staple prices at Aldi were for bread $1.39, eggs $3.76, whole milk $2.85. That's down from last week. Heavy cream $5.39, hold and steady at, oh my god, that's like more than twice what it was 2 years ago. Orange juice $3.45, butter $3.99, bacon $3.99, potatoes $4.49, sugar $2.99, flour $2.35, and 80% lean ground beef is $4.39. I will say this shopping report helped me last week when I bought bacon at Sam's Club because I got it for $3.09 at Sam's Club. So, and I was like, well, I just happen to know what the price is at Aldi, so I don't need to go check there. Anyway, next up is Operation Independence. This is our last usual segment before we get into the main topic of today's show, which is all about the $7 coffee and its meaning in your life. Okay. Operation Independence came to be because I talked about early on in the podcast about building your life strategic plan around my 3 things method. And it's a method I've used for a really long time. And one of my strategic areas of focus was having more financial stability, like enough ongoing revenue that we are regenerative here on a financial standpoint. So, in order to have success in our long term life vision, that financial piece has to be handled. And at the time, I was very dependent on one source of income, and that source of income was not here. And so, one of my little like smaller goals was to develop more ongoing local revenue, whether that be from side hustles from the homestead, whether that be different things from people around here. What it turned into over time is generating some revenue from the homestead, the production of the homestead, reducing my need to earn money, plus pay taxes on that money to buy things. And then it also resulted in what you see now, which is Nicole Sauce Industries, which is Living Free in Tennessee podcast. It's Hollow Roast Coffee. And it is the festivals we do, like Self-Reliance Festival and my spring workshop and the other training things we do here. And so it's sort of like I've turned the holler into what's a developing agritourism area. We've got events. It's really cool. Now, you guys need to know that I have a couple other side hustles that are separate from that have been always been part of my plan, including some rentals, because that's going to be germane to this episode. Why I'm talking about that is today's episode is about changing your financial future. It's about changing your financial future. So Homestead says, where's coffee $7? I spent $3.90 for a cappuccino. I want to know because I want to try some $7 coffee. Well, if you'd like to have bad coffee for $7, come to the United States and get a latte with an extra shot, and you'll get real close to that at Starbucks. And Starbucks just ain't that great. They're not terrible. They're not terrible compared to a lot of other coffees you can get in this country, but they are not that great. So that's the $7 coffee. And this used to be the $5 coffee, but then last time I was at Starbucks, it cost me $8. And I kind of compromised between the whole thing. So that's the deal. Okay. That's the $7 coffee for my friend from Europe. Something I've noticed about Europe is like food things in particular tend to be better. And often I will find things lower there. So I'm from the USA and I agree. I hate Starbucks. Okay. Well, then why were you talking to me about Euro if you're from the US? I'm just curious. Anyway, okay. So back to Operation Independence. Today is a big day for me. Like you all have heard me like paying off all of my bad decision debt, which was revolving debt, and going through all of these things right after the show. And the reason we are going an hour early is because I need to get to the bank before they close. They close at 4. And the reason I need to get to the bank is that I am paying off my mortgage. And it happened because of the $7 coffee. So one of the things about the US that I like is that you can get a house here. You can buy one, right? And property ownership is still a foundation around which our culture revolves. Now, there's been a lot of abuses in that, but it is still the foundation. And leveraging your home to build something that gives you ongoing resilience, especially when money costs less, like when the interest rate on loans is less than inflation, is a tool that people have used for a long time to get ahead. Right now, interest rates are up. The math is a little bit different when that happens. And when you're considering home ownership, you should look at the total big picture in the context of your life. But there's also a trap there. There's an immense pressure to chase the American dream, get your house, whatever, get that all set up, that pushes people into really wanting to make the goal of getting the house, and sometimes making really bad decisions that puts them in a perpetual I don't have enough money situation, and they never really own their house. The bank owns their house because it's like a weird thing where you're going to pay rent if you don't own your house. You're going to pay a mortgage if you finance your house. So where do you make that decision where it doesn't make sense to pay rent anymore and it does make sense to pay a mortgage and be responsible for everything that breaks in your house? That's the trap that can be there. And then once you get into the house and you start having equity in your house, especially what's happened in like the last, I don't know, 20 years in the housing market, as values have gone way up, you now have equity. You can borrow against equity for decently low interest and do stuff with that money. And what you do with that money, again, that can be a tool that like propels you into long-term generational wealth. Or you overextend and lose everything. Because if you leverage, that would be bad. That can be bad, especially if you don't have a plan for how you're going to manage that, right? So I think home ownership is one of the amazing things, and land ownership is one of the amazing things about the USA, uh, because it's relatively easy when compared to many, many more places in the world, even though prices have gone way up in the last 4 years. And even though interest rates are higher right now, I'm getting the buy Bitcoin. I am in my, by the way, yes, I do know how to drive a stick shirt today. So I was in my Bitcoin shirt on Friday. So I don't think there's any one answer to how you build wealth in your life. I think you need to think about it strategically. And it's probably multiple answers that get you where you need to go. But it starts with the mindset, right? It really starts with the mindset. So we can buy our homes outright, but it doesn't always make sense to do that. Because if you have a 2% loan on your house that you're using for building something that is also going to turn into an asset for you in a time when inflation is in upper single and lower double digits, then that might make sense too. You got to think about the big picture, but you also have to have the financial chops and discipline to be able to do that. So if we organize our homes right, your home can become a source of your livelihood still to this day in 2004, even if you're just starting to buy your place right now. In fact, I know somebody, it's a holler neighbor who just like they've had houses, so they had some assets built, but they bought their first country piece of land and they're building it into that asset right now, right? They're going to make it so that they can get a livelihood off the land so that they're more sustainable, which is pretty darn cool. Like they've already got hay fields there, which is something that you can manage and make money on if you do it right, or at least turn it into something you can feed, something that you can eat, right? So there's lots of different ways to do that. But I'm here to talk about the $7 coffee. And if you want to say $5 coffee in your head, to Homestead's point, that's fine. I call it the $7 coffee because I split the difference, as I said earlier. The $7 coffee at Starbucks does, in fact, matter very much when you build your financial foundation. Bluntly, if you don't fix your income problems, that $7 coffee is not the problem. It's not the thing that changes your life. But if you use the $7 coffee to change your mindset, it can be the catalyst that propels you forward into many, many good things. Now, why? I mean, every penny pincher article that you read about getting a handle on your spending tends to start with, or in the first couple of items, telling you to stop getting that coffee, not go out to lunch, and it's usually around food, right? They'll go straight for the coffee. And many people react to that scoffing. They're just like, "What? That's not my problem." Like, I hardly ever get coffee, right? I call that line in those penny pincher articles the scoffy line because it will trigger people who will not read the rest of the article because they mentioned the $7 coffee thing. But here's the thing about the $7 coffee. So I've already lost some of you, right? Because I brought up the $7 coffee, but that's what today's show is about. Uh, I had already planned to pay my home mortgage off ahead of schedule when I financed it. It was based on some decisions I made about how I would do it. Gonna pay off September 2025. That was my plan. And for me, in my early 50s, like most people don't pay off their house at my age. A lot of people, though, pay it off early. Some of them never even get into a mortgage. And some people are going into retirement with mortgages because they keep getting a bigger and a bigger and a bigger house. But something I did early on is I rounded up my mortgage payments every month if it was like in a weird place. So it would be anywhere from $3 to $9 to take it from, let's say it was $1,000, 1,001.39, right? Is the payment with escrow. I would round that up to, 1,005 or 1,010 or whatever. Like I just rounded up so it was there. And um I also along the way had a couple of times where I had extra savings hanging around and I actually paid 2 full month mortgage payments ahead of schedule and applied it towards the principal over like random times. Like if a tax return was good, I just added an extra month's payment to the mortgage that year. I only did that twice, so it was not a lot. Um, but the end result of that was that I ended up paying off my mortgage a year earlier than I was expecting to pay it off early. And there's less total interest that I paid on the loan because I was hitting the principal to the tune of 1 Starbucks a month, approximately. And that takes us back to the coffee problem. People hear about Starbucks and are like, I don't buy a drink every day. That's not really going to save me that money because they say it like this, like, don't buy a coffee 3 times a week because that adds up to, whatever, $60 you could put in your pocket or every day. And they do 30 days in the month and it's a bigger number. Or they give you the annual amount that is and it's a bigger number, right? That's the coffee problem. In fact, if you rarely buy a coffee, you hear that and you're like, meh, I've already cut that out. I only have a coffee a month. But now there's me. I paid off a mortgage and a whole year faster and saved hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in interest over the lifetime of the loan by adding 1 Starbucks coffee per month to my principal on the loan. So actually, that 1 cup of Starbucks every month has made a huge difference for me because decisions that like I know exactly what I'm doing once this is paid off, right? Uh that's a whole year, it's a whole 12 months sooner than I was going to get to do all the things that I was going to get to do once that mortgage was paid off. But the bigger thing here is what's your mindset? Because most of us, especially if we've been programmed by the society we're in, find it easier to make a decision to spend $7 on a cup of coffee than $400 on a really nice coffee machine or coffee maker or class to learn how to make the coffee we like or whatever that is, right? So by default, it's easier to spend $7 on this every day than $400 on a coffee maker. But if you really want to build that into your life and you love the awesome coffee, which, as you guys know, with Hollow Roast, I love the awesome coffee. Maybe the long-term best decision you can make is to, in fact, spend more money and buy that $400 coffee machine, right? Rather than $7 a couple times a week. So that's a mindset thing. And what's in that sentence is looking at Where does it fit in my priority? Do I have the $400, right? And if I don't, what do I have to do to get the $400 so that I can buy that coffee maker if that's what I want? And what's the lifetime of that coffee maker? And how does that work when I buy nice coffee to go in the coffee maker within the context of a $7 coffee? And that decision, you can spend a lot of time making that decision, but what I just talked you through, for me, it takes me about 3 to 5 minutes to usually to look up what I need to look up for a decision of that scale. I don't need to spend weeks on it. Because the other thing you don't want to do is waste a bunch of time going down the bunny hole of every possible expense of every possible thing and do that, because if you waste too much time analyzing these things, you're not making decisions and you're not taking action. If you don't take action, you don't get ahead at all. So it is easier to buy the $7 coffee because you don't have to decide. You don't have to look at the reality, but it's not necessarily better to do that. And that this carries through to other parts of life, right? Like I bought the Vivor. This is one I did wrong. I bought the Vivor vacuum sealer, which is significantly less than the VacMaster. And I put it through its paces and it lasted 1 year. And then their customer support was so terrible that I bought the VacMaster anyway. So I should have just bought the VacMaster, which was like twice as expensive as what I would have spent. That math's a little different now. And for me, for my use, the VacMaster is what makes sense in the context of how we produce our food here. And for most people, the Vivor makes more sense. So it's really like you have to know your situation. In a different Vivor example, there are Vivor raised beds here. And when you compare those to the wood ones last about 2 years in Tennessee, and they cost slightly less than the Vivor bed, but in the same amount like of money. And the Vivor bed's going to last way longer. But if we did a self-made one and we included our time, it would be way more expensive and even more durable than Vivor to make that. But I don't need that like third option for me for this item. The Vivor raised beds are doing exactly what I need them to do for the duration. And Amy's like, oh no, I have a Vivor vac sealer. Amy, you're probably fine. What I do with vacuum sealers is like a different scale of what people do. You're probably absolutely fine. The problem was that I have multiple people using it, and I need the customer service more than anything else when something goes wrong. And I just did not have that, could not get the part I needed. I actually finally a year later figured out which part that was, that they don't sell, but somebody else sells one that will work, I'm pretty sure. So that's just the deal. But that's about mindset. It's about the $7 coffee, because the $7 coffee is a symbol for making a short-term choice for your instant gratification monkey versus choices that serve the long term. So when you make this short-term coffee decision and it doesn't serve your long-term goal, then you're in trouble. Because you start doing, it's very easy to make the $7 choice, which means you're making multiple of those $7 coffee choices and it's something different every time. But when you do that and you get into that habit, you're not actually thinking in the context of where's my life going and how do I want to make it better? And this then requires you to say, well, what is my long-term goal? And we talk about that a lot here, right? Like, how do you set your long-term goal? How do you want your life to be? How does your family want to be? Like, how do you want to live? What do you want to see every day? Those sorts of things. What does money look like? What do you have in place for your long-term goal now? So when you're like, you know what, the life I want is something where I don't have to wake up to an alarm clock and my energies can be put into, facilitating an environment where people feel welcome and can learn skills they need to further freedom in their life, or whatever it is. Like whatever your goal is, that's what your goal is. What do you have in place now for it? Usually when you have a goal, you already have some skills in that direction, or you might have something you can leverage towards it. I know when I most recently updated my life strategic plan, I already was living here in the holler on a 3.2 acre homestead. I had relationships with neighbors with unused land who will let me run livestock on their land, because then they don't have to pay a guy to trim it because my livestock trims it, right? So I had some things already in place. But then once you know what you have in place, what needs to change to get there? What are like 2 or 3 things that need to change? What needs to be developed? What do you need to accomplish to move in the direction where you have the life that you love, where you can live your life on your terms and not be like stuck on the hamster wheel of what society has designed for you by putting you through the university system and getting you in debt and getting you to think about things in terms of monthly expenses until total life, those sorts of things. Because just running the math on the $400 coffee machine versus the $7 cup of coffee you buy at the cafe is something that is so unusual that that already sets you apart from people if you're starting to look at things that way. Even if you still opt for the $7 cup of coffee, at least you know why you're doing it, right? And then what do you need to do? What little things do you need to do every day to make those changes, to develop the new things in your life and to accomplish the things that you want to meet your long-term goal for how you want your life to be? That's why the $7 coffee matters. It's not the coffee. It's the choice for the coffee. It's the habit of buying the coffee. It's the not thinking about why you're doing it. When you get your life plan into simple terms, that sets your foundation for more success. That's why we hammer on that for my 3 things. Like we hammer on language hard when you're coming up with your vision. We hammer on language hard when we talk about purpose. And by the way, if you're like in that process, like Daniel in our Telegram group was going through that this year with his family, Margot's really good at rewording things after you get it out there in really uncomfortably clunky language. But we hammer on that hard because when you have simple terms, you don't have to look at a book every time you make a decision and be like, what did I mean there? You know what it means. You know what that means for you, and you can use that to make little decisions every day that move you towards your long-term goal, as opposed to keep you from getting to your long-term goal, which is not where you want to be. If your life strategic plan is complicated and a big thick book and 27,000 pages long, you're not going to read it, first of all. And you're not going to understand really well what you're doing or why you're doing it. And the whole purpose of my 3 things, by the way, is to do that. It's to understand why you're going the direction you're going so that you can make everyday decisions that are the best decisions for you. If you have a complicated life strategic plan, you will not do it, right? You will not do it. But there's a part 2. So $7 coffee absolutely matters. One $7 coffee does not matter. It's the symbol of what the $7 coffee is. The funny thing, though, back to my story about the $7 coffee. Yes, I'm paying off my mortgage 1 year early because I basically put the equivalent of a $7 coffee onto my mortgage every month against the principal. But I was almost in a scenario where I could not pay off my mortgage today, even though I had done everything that I've done in the last years that you guys have been following this podcast, right? To make sure that my financial future is secured as much as I can, to improve my financial literacy, to spend the time learning about how cryptocurrency works, to learn how I can barter or avoid paying taxes by producing some of my own stuff, to increase how much money I make, because that's an important part of the equation too, to not sell myself short when I'm talking to people. That's like the first thing you got to do is stop feeling guilty about charging what you should be charging for the things. You can always give something to somebody because you want to, but you should be charging what you're going to charge, right? Like what you're worth. I almost ran into a situation where I didn't have enough money to pay it off because I triggered a clause that makes me have to pay it off in 30 days. And this clause, which I did read I actually read my mortgage paperwork. It's also something most people don't do. It really makes your closing agent mad at you, but whatever. They could be mad. I just read, they were like really impatient. I triggered a clause where if your principal balance falls below your total monthly payment, you have 30 days to pay it off. And when I read that clause, the scenario that was in my mind was, okay, so like, and guys, don't get mad, but my mortgage payment originally was $550. that's a whole different topic about choosing your home that we could talk about. It had gone up to $750 because hazard insurance has more than doubled in the last year and a half. What that meant for me, because when you pay a mortgage, you're paying the loan, and then they pay your fire slash homeowners insurance for you, and they pay your taxes for you, so they make sure those things are always there. They're doing that to protect themselves, because if there was a fire in the house and I didn't have insurance, then they'd be out, right? But so what happens is you have an escrow account attached with your mortgage. And when they pay those things, they pay it all at once, and then they sort of amortize it over 12 months, right? The word amortize was not coming out. So they like kind of divide it up. But at the beginning of the year, they choose what that number is based on what they think your expenses will be, both for the hazard insurance and for the taxes. So my mortgage was set up that way. And that way I didn't have to send them a thing proving insurance every month, every year, because it was like, okay, well, she has insurance because we paid her insurance. So there you go. Because hazard insurance has gone up so much in the last year and a half, they undercharged me for the escrow account last year. And what you can do when that happens is they can be like, hey, you owe $1,000 for escrow, or they're like, hey, but we'll just increase your payment by, $75, $80 a month, and it'll make it up by the next one, right? So then the next thing they did was this year's hazard insurance was also higher. So they underestimated my escrow for this year too. So basically in my escrow account, the balance was like $4,000. Okay. So when we triggered the clause and I pay $750 a month right now. So when we triggered that clause, what we were looking at was, in order to pay it off in 30 days, my price is just under $5,000 to pay it off. And I have 30 days to do that, starting October 1st. So I have actually till the end of October. And then this year, you add on top of that, my savings has been tapped harder because I don't know if you guys realize how many times I flew to California this year, but it was a large number of times. And there was a lot of personal stuff going on just related to expenses that come out of the savings account. And the $1,000 emergency fund is not $5,000, and it doesn't become $5,000 like that, right? So here I was like, sweet, I accidentally paid off my mortgage a year early. Also, I have to come up with $5,000 in the next 30 days. Now, I could have totally borrowed that from somebody, put it on a card, which we're not supposed to do if we want to stay out of debt. I could have done a lot of different things, right? But then I got to thinking about it, and I realized that one of my side hustles that's totally separate from the cold sauce industries has a bank account associated, because it has to be completely separate financially for reporting reasons. And it's an account that I don't touch because it's a 4-year-old side hustle at this point, 3 or 4 years old. And I have everything just kind of in that account, so I can reinvest in that side hustle every time I need to from that account, right? And the amount in that account is more than anything I need to pay off the $5,000 for my mortgage. So I realized I can take an owner draw from that, and without borrowing anything, paid off, which means that side hustle, which I've been very careful about not doing anything with, is going to make my mortgage be gone. Even though I ended up in this bizarre place where, because of how inflation hit the insurance market, I had an unusually high escrow account. We'll just put it that way. So that's it. Just by making little decisions every day, starting with the $7 coffee. And I did this. I, in fact, bought a coffee machine that was $250 at the time. It's $400 now, so that I could make the kind of coffee I wanted to make at home, so I didn't buy it out. And then I started making that kind of decision with the long term in mind, time over time over time, including when starting a side hustle, reinvesting 100% back into the side hustle to see where it would go. And that's why I'm sitting here today, right? I have some questions coming up, actually. I'll get to at the end of this. So That's what I mean when I say, yes, that $7 coffee does matter. It's not so much about the coffee, it's about the mindset. And guess what I'm going to do with the extra money I'm getting every month now that I don't have to pay a mortgage every month? Because that's 750 bucks coming in every month that I didn't have before. You got it. I'm going to save it and turn it into another asset because I am used to living without that $750. I am not going to Tahiti. I probably could get to Tahiti for $750, but you know what I mean? Like, I'm not just going to go crazy with that or increase my lifestyle, right? That goes straight into a savings account until my savings account is back to where it needs to be, which is higher than the $1,000. And then from there, it goes into other things that I can leverage into future financial stability. That's what's happening with that. So, yeah, that $7 coffee really does matter. Now, before I wrap up the show, and I'm going to wrap it up on time today because I really do have to get to the bank before they close. Because I have to be there in person to pay off the mortgage, by the way. That's the other part that's super fun. Tori says, the part that bugs me, every year mortgage payment goes up because they're wrong calculation. I started just paying into my escrow an extra $20 a month. Yeah, I mean, I'm like fine with just having the money in that situation. And I usually would have paid like a one-time lump, but it was $1,000. And I was like entering into this time of needing to tap into my savings for other things. And I was like, well, it doesn't really matter. I'll just like, they're not tapping interest on that. So I will just move forward with that. Homestead says, what was the side hustle? I have been slowly building rental properties over a long time, and it was my rental business, is what it was. Which the reason the reason I mean 100% is going back in is when that account gets to a certain amount, I can buy another property and then have more rental income. Question: does your side hustle involve a spinning wheel? No, but I love my spinning wheel and I love spinning, so that's the way it is. And then other than that, we've got no other questions, guys. Just remember, it's the little decisions every day that matter more than many of the biggest decisions we make. And we will agonize for months over which job to take when, if you make the decision about your job within the context of what you want relatively quickly, usually it works out. And if it doesn't, usually you can like shift fire to something else. But that $7 coffee, that decision that's like super easy to make, that's the one that can make your mindset wrong and get you down the wrong path rather than making small decisions every day to build towards your goals. Because when you do that, they arrive faster than you think they will. With that, if you like the show, want to support the work I'm doing here, and you like coffee, get your coffee at hollowroast.com or consider becoming a member. Our next member webinar will be in October with Ryan Steva. And what's he going to talk about? I should know what he's going to talk about, but for some reason, I've just had a giant brain fart. I think it's solar related. La, 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 la. Anyway, I'll tell you what it is next time. And then we have one in November with Nighthawk where he's going to talk about proper care of your cast iron stuff. So we will get those all out in the Monday mail, which will go out on Tuesday this week. And it'll be a really good time. Anyway, with that, guys, go out. Think about that $7 coffee. Make it a great week.